They dressed me in white. Not because it was beautiful. Because white was the color of surrender. My mother's old wedding gown, the one she wore the day she believed she was loved. Now repurposed. Now wrapped around the daughter she left behind. Like the universe had a sense of humor too cruel to laugh at. I remember the way the candlelight moved inside the great hall that evening. Like the flames themselves were nervous. Like even fire knew something was wrong. My father stood at the head of the table. His hands were folded. His jaw was set. And his eyes, the eyes I had once searched for pride, for warmth, for anything at all, were perfectly, deliberately, empty. He didn't look at me. He looked through me. Like I was already gone. The elders sat in a row to his left. 7 men in dark robes. Their faces carved from a lifetime of making decisions that cost other people everything. They had come to witness. To approve. To nod their old heads and call it necessary. One of them spoke. His voice was dry. Rehearsed. The Alpha King's madness grows worse, he said. 3 guards were found dead in the East Corridor last night. The curse will consume him, and when it does, it will consume us all. The sacrifice must be delivered before the next full moon. Silence. The kind of silence that presses down on your chest. The kind that asks you to simply accept. I looked at my father. He still would not look at me. And in that moment, standing in my dead mother's dress, surrounded by men who had already decided my fate, I made myself a promise. If I survived this night, I would never again wait for someone else to save me. That was the night everything began. And nothing, not the curse, not the crown, not the blood, nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 1. My name is Lyra Voss. And I was not born to be a sacrifice. I was born in the village of Ashvale, a quiet place tucked between the edge of the Thornwood Forest and the border of the Alpha King's territory. The kind of village where everyone knew your name. Where the bread from the baker's shop could be smelled 3 streets over. Where children grew up believing the worst thing that could happen to them was a hard winter. I grew up believing that too. My father, Aldrich Voss, was once the most respected man in Ashvale. He had been an envoy, a political negotiator who carried messages between packed territories, who sat at the tables of lords and alphas and spoke with the confidence of a man who knew his value. He was tall, broad-shouldered. He had kind eyes back then. He had kind eyes when my mother was alive. She died when I was 9. A fever that moved fast and took everything. I remember the way the house changed after that. Not immediately. Gradually. Like a candle burning down. First the laughter disappeared. Then the warmth. Then the careful attention he had once paid to everything. His work, his home, his daughter. By the time I was 14, my father was drinking. By 16, he was borrowing money. By 18, he had borrowed from people who did not forget. I worked. I always worked. I took in sewing. I helped the healer with her herbs. I sold bread from our windowsill on market days. Anything to keep us above water. But the debt grew faster than anything I could earn. And my father, the man who had once walked into rooms full of alphas and held his head high, had become something smaller. Something afraid. I understood it. The way you understand a wound. It hurt to look at. But it was still there. What I did not understand, what I could never have prepared for, was how far fear could take a person. How much of themselves they could surrender. How easily a father could look at his only daughter and calculate her worth against his own survival. I didn't know that yet. Not when I was still mending the tears in other people's dresses and counting coins at the kitchen table. Not when I still believed that whatever happened, my father would protect me. The first sign came 3 weeks before the full moon. He was quieter than usual. Not the tired quiet. Not the drinking quiet. The planning quiet. He stopped asking about my work. Stopped eating dinner with me. He met with people I didn't recognize. Men with rings on their fingers and no warmth in their faces. They arrived after dark and left before dawn. I told myself it was about the debt. I told myself he was working something out. I told myself a lot of things that month. And every single one of them was wrong. Chapter 2. The morning it happened felt ordinary. That's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't arrive with thunder. It doesn't warn you. It wears the face of a regular day, pale morning light through the curtains, the smell of rain on cold stone, the distant sound of birds doing what birds have always done. I was at the kitchen table with my tea when my father walked in. He was already dressed. Coat buttoned. Hair combed. like he had been awake for a long time already. He sat across from me, and for a moment, he just looked at me. Really looked. The way he used to when I was small. Something moved behind his eyes, some last, dying piece of the man he had once been. Then it went out. "The elders came to me last week," he said. I set down my cup. What did they want? They needed someone. He paused. For the Alpha King's tribute. I had heard of it. Everyone in Ashvale had. Every full moon, a sacrifice was delivered to the palace of the cursed king, to keep his madness contained, they said. To give it something to spend itself on so it wouldn't spill into the surrounding territories. No sacrifice had ever come back. Who? I asked. He didn't answer. And that was when I knew. The silence stretched between us like a chasm opening in the floor. I watched his face. I watched him not look at me. I watched his hands grip the edge of the table. Papa. Still nothing. Papa. My voice cracked on the second syllable. Tell me you didn't. The debt, Lyra. Tell me you didn't. There was no other way. His voice rose. Like anger was easier than shame. The men I owe, they would have burned the house. Burned the village. You don't understand the kind of people. You offered me. I stood. The chair scraped stone. You offered me to buy your way out. You will be honored, he said. Like he believed it. Or like he needed to. The elders said it is a great sacrifice, a noble. Don't. The word came out like a stone thrown. Don't dress this up. Don't make it something it isn't. He flinched. And I hated him for flinching when I was the one being destroyed. I hated him. And I grieved him. Both at once. In that impossible way that only the people we love can make us feel. I saved us, he whispered. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I walked to my room. And I began to pack. Not because I was running. There was nowhere to run. The elders had already sealed the arrangement. The men surrounding our village on the North Road were proof of that. I packed because I needed something to do with my hands. Because if I stopped moving, I would fall apart. And I refused to fall apart in that house. They came for me at dusk. 4 guards in full armor. Rope in their hands. My father stood in the doorway as they led me out. You will save us all, he said. He whispered it like absolution. Like he needed me to hand him something clean. I didn't look back. I kept walking. Even when they put the rope around my wrists. Even when they pushed me into the cart. Even when I heard my father's front door close behind me, quiet and final as a grave. I kept my chin up. Because that was all I had left. Chapter 3. They said the Alpha King's palace was beautiful once. I believe it. You could still see it. Underneath the damage. Underneath the scorch marks on the outer walls, the collapsed towers on the east wing, the corridors that had simply been destroyed from the inside. Walls caved in. Floors fractured like something enormous had thrown itself against them over and over. Something had. We arrived at the iron gates just as the last light left the sky. The guards at the gate were massive, all of them former warriors, all carrying silver-tipped weapons. They wore expressions that said they had seen too many of these nights to feel anything about another one. One of them looked at me. Just once. Then he looked away. Inside, the palace was a contradiction. Parts of it were still magnificent. Marble floors. Arched ceilings with painted constellations faded to ghosts. Tapestries that had survived because they hung in the wings furthest from the king's chambers. And parts of it were ruin. A servant met us at the inner door. Young. She had the kind of face that had learned not to show emotion the hard way. She led me to the king's chamber. Which was less a chamber and more a fortress within the fortress. Reinforced doors. 3 bolt locks on the outside. Chains bolted deep into the walls. A single window, narrow, high, barred. And in the center of the room, a chair. Just a chair. He won't hurt you for a while yet, the servant murmured, unprompted. Like she was doing me a kindness. The madness doesn't come until midnight. You have hours. What happens at midnight? I asked. She didn't answer. She left. The bolt lock turned behind her. I stood alone in the center of the king's chamber. 3 hours until midnight. I did what I had always done when I was afraid. I moved. I walked the room's perimeter, touching walls, taking stock. The chains were set into the stone, heavy iron, older than anything else here. There were grooves in the floor near them. Deep grooves, worn by pacing, by circling, by years of something vast contained in something small. There were marks on the walls too. Claw marks. Long and dragged, like something had tried to tear through stone with its bare hands. I pressed my fingertips into one of the grooves. And something strange happened. Instead of fear, I felt something else. A pull. Deep and wordless. Like a song heard through a thick wall. Like a name on the tip of my tongue. I pulled my hand back. And I waited. Chapter 4. Midnight arrived like a wave. The air changed first. A low pressure building, the way it builds before a storm breaks the sky open. The temperature dropped. The candle they had left me flickered violently, casting shadows that moved like living things. Then I heard him. From somewhere deep in the palace, a sound that had no clean word in any language. Not a howl. Not a scream. Something caught exactly between the two. Something raw and ragged and enormous. Getting closer. I pressed my back against the far wall. The bolt on the chamber door, the one locked from the outside, slid back. Not from the outside. From within. A hidden entrance in the left stone wall swung open. Half concealed by shadow. It had been there the whole time. And he walked in. King Cale Draven. The mad Alpha King. I had imagined many things on the road here. I had prepared myself for something monstrous, misshapen, wild-eyed, foaming, gone. I had steeled myself for a creature more beast than man. What walked through that door was a man. Devastatingly, terrifyingly, completely a man. He was enormous. Not just tall. Built like something carved from the land itself. Broad through the shoulders, dark hair tangled, wearing a shirt torn open at the collar like he had woken up that way and simply stopped caring. His hands, the same hands that had left those claw marks in the wall, were clenched at his sides. And his eyes. His eyes were glowing silver. Molten. Burning. The color of the moon at its absolute fullest. They were wild. They were in pain. He stepped into the room. He saw me. And he stopped. Everything stopped. The sound building in his chest, that deep, rolling, terrible sound, cut off mid-breath. Like a switch. Like silence had been thrown over everything. He stared at me. I stared at him. My heart was doing something I had no name for. Not just fear. Not just survival adrenaline. Something that ran deeper. Something that lived under the skin. That pull again. Stronger now. He took one step toward me. His silver eyes locked onto mine. And then, before I could breathe, before I could run, before I could think a single complete thought, he went to his knees. Not violently. Not like a fall. Like a collapse of something internal. Like a man whose legs had simply given out under the weight of something he wasn't prepared for. His silver eyes never left mine. And from his lips, rough, barely voiced, like a word he hadn't said in years. Mate. The room was silent. The candle had stopped flickering. Even the shadows seemed to hold still. I could not breathe. I could not move. The Alpha King of this entire territory, cursed, feared, called mad, was on his knees on the stone floor in front of me. And his face, for one single, suspended moment, was not mad at all. It was broken. And it was hoping. I took one step toward him. I don't know why. My hands reached out. Almost on their own. Like my body knew something my mind was still trying to catch up to. My fingers touched his face. The moment my skin met his jaw, the silver in his eyes exploded. He lurched back. A sound tore out of him. Pain and rage wound together into something unbearable. He grabbed the chains on the wall and locked them around his own wrists. Get away from me, he snarled. Get away. Now. I will kill you. You haven't yet, I said. My voice was steadier than it had any right to be. He looked at me through the silver. Jaw clenched. Body shaking with effort. You don't understand what I am right now, he said. You need to leave. There is a passage. I know, I said. You have a hidden door. You could have used it to escape every night and you didn't. Why? He looked at me, breathing hard. What is your name? He asked finally. Lyra. He closed his eyes. Lyra. Like the word cost him something precious. Then the silver surged back. He turned away. And for the rest of that night, He held himself in those chains and fought whatever lived inside him while I sat against the opposite wall, watching, learning, listening to the sound of a man at war with himself. I didn't sleep. But I didn't die either. In the morning, when the madness had finally passed and he was simply exhausted, he looked across the room at me. "You should be dead," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I know," I said. "Why aren't you running?" "I told you. There's a door, but it opens from this side," he said. "You could have left any time." The silence stretched. "Why didn't you?" he asked. I thought about it honestly. "Because something about this room felt like the truth," I said. "And I've had enough of lies to last me a lifetime." He said nothing. Just watched me. With eyes that were silver gray now. Quiet. Vast. Like still water after a storm. I didn't leave. Not that morning. Not the next. And everything, changed because of that. Chapter 5. A week passed. 1 week inside a palace that had stopped believing in mercy. And somehow, inexplicably, stubbornly, I was still breathing. The servants couldn't explain it. I could see it in their faces every morning, the quick blink, the carefully masked surprise. Some of them started leaving my food tray closer to the chamber door rather than outside it. Small shift. Barely anything. But they noticed I was still there. And they adjusted. Kale and I existed in a strange suspended truce. During the day, he was quiet. Almost unbearably so. He moved through the parts of the palace still intact, the library, the old war room, the corridors with the windows intact. A servant named Mara told me in whispered fragments, when she thought I wasn't paying close attention. "He used to read everything," she murmured one afternoon, refilling my water basin. "Before the curse. He used to know the name of every person in the territory, every family, every child born in the outer villages." "What happened to him?" I asked. "Exactly." She glanced at the door. "He went north. A treaty negotiation with the border territories. He came back 3 years ago and he was wrong. Changed. Like someone had hollowed him out and filled the space with something else." "Did anyone question it?" "His council said it was the pressure of the journey. The Northern Alphas are brutal in negotiations. They said it broke him." She paused. "But I never believed that. The change was too fast. Too complete." "Like a switch," I said. "Exactly like that." That night, when the clock moved toward midnight and the air began its familiar thickening, I didn't press myself against the wall. I sat in the center of the room. He came through the hidden door. Silver eyes already burning. Body coiled with effort, like he had been fighting the tide of it all day. He saw where I was sitting. He stopped. "Move," he said. "No. Lyra. I've been watching you for 6 nights," I said. "The madness comes. It peaks. It breaks. You fight yourself until dawn and wake up in the wreckage. And you spend the whole day trying not to think about it. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me I'm wrong." Silence. "Tell me I'm wrong," I said again. Softer. He looked at me for a long moment. The silver was building in his eyes. Slow and inevitable, like a tide with nowhere left to go. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" he asked. "I am," I said honestly. "But I'm more afraid of what's happening to you." Something crossed his face then. Fast. Complicated. Gone before I could name it. He stayed in the center of the room that night instead of going straight to the chains. The madness took him eventually. It always did. But it took longer. And when it came, it was fractionally, almost imperceptibly less violent. I started talking through it. Not commands. Not soothing nonsense. Just talking. About Ashvale. About the baker's bread and how you could smell it from the East End on cold mornings. About my mother's garden. About ordinary, grounded, real things. Something in him listened. Even through the silver. Even through the fire of it. On the 8th night, he didn't reach for the chains at all. He sat against the opposite wall and shook through it, but he didn't break anything. He didn't hurt me. He didn't hurt himself. When dawn came and the silver faded, he looked at me with gray eyes that were raw and exhausted and, underneath all of that, searching. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. "I don't know yet," I said. "But I think something about me helps." "You're my mate," he said. The words were flat. Not romantic. Not tender. Just stated. Like a fact he had been sitting with. I know, I said. You understand what that means. I'm learning. He was quiet for a moment. Then, a fated bond should soothe this entirely. The fact that it doesn't, he stopped. Means what? I asked. He looked at the morning light coming through the barred window, falling across the floor in long, pale strips. Means the madness isn't mine, he said. It was placed. The words landed in the quiet room like stones dropped into still water. Someone cursed you, I said. Yes. Who? He turned and looked at me, and in his grey eyes, underneath the exhaustion and the years of this, I saw something I had not expected to find there. Fear. Not of the curse. Not of the madness. Fear of the answer. Because he already knew who had done it. And the answer was someone he had once trusted with his life. Chapter 6. I spent the next 2 days moving through the palace differently. Not as a prisoner. Not quite as a guest. As something in between, someone the palace hadn't decided what to do with, and so had chosen, provisionally, to leave alone. I used that. Mara had taken to bringing my food herself rather than leaving it at the outer door. I think she was lonely. I recognized loneliness like a language. I had been fluent in it for years. How long have you been here? I asked one afternoon. My whole life, she said. My mother served in the kitchens. Her mother before that. A small pause. I remember him before, you know, before the curse. What was he like? Her hands stilled. Good, she said. Like the word surprised her as she said it. He was genuinely good. I know that's not what the stories say. But I was 12 when it started and I remember the year before. He knew my name. He asked after my mother when she was sick. He passed new rulings for the servants, better hours, better conditions. She shook her head slowly. None of that gets told in the stories. Who went with him? I asked. When he traveled north. For the treaty. Her expression shifted. Became careful. His council, she said. His closest advisors. Which ones? A long pause. Lord Castle, she said. He handles all territorial negotiations. Has done for 15 years. And where is Lord Castle now? Mara looked at the door. Then back at me. Here, she said quietly. He never left. He's been managing the territory since the king became unwell. Managing the territory. While the king he served deteriorated. While sacrifice after sacrifice was delivered to contain the damage. I thought about that for a long time after she left. That night, I waited for the madness to peak and break, and when dawn came and Kale was exhausted and quiet, I told him what I had been thinking. Your council member. Castle. He went very still. What about him? He was there. When it happened. He came back with you. And now he's running your territory while you're chained in here. A long silence. You think Castle cursed me? I think it's worth asking, I said carefully. What do you know about him? Before the journey. Before any of this. Kale leaned back against the stone wall. His eyes were distant. Somewhere in the past. He served my father, he said. He was the one who told me the Northern Treaty was urgent. That if I didn't go personally, the border pacts would interpret it as disrespect. That war would follow. So he put you on the road. Yes. And he came with you. Yes. And he's the one who's been managing things since you came back wrong. Kale said nothing. But his jaw was tight enough to crack stone. There's more, I said. Isn't there? He looked at me. I had a sister, he said quietly. Younger. She was supposed to inherit if anything happened to me. 2 months after I returned, she disappeared. The council said she ran away. Couldn't handle the chaos of the curse. Did you believe that? No, he said. But I was. He stopped. I was already losing myself by then. I couldn't protect her. I couldn't. His voice fractured. Just briefly. I couldn't even protect myself. I leaned toward him. Without thinking. Then let me help, I said. Let me actually help. He looked at me for a long moment. His grey eyes moved across my face like he was reading something written there. Something he wanted to believe was real. Why would you do that? he asked. After what your father did. After what he gestured at the room. The chains. The marks on the walls. After all of this. Why? Because I made myself a promise, I said. That I would stop waiting for someone else to fix things. He was quiet. Then, slowly, like a door opening that had been sealed for years. There is something, he said. Something I found buried in the old records before the madness got bad enough that I couldn't read anymore. Something about the curse. About how it was built. Tell me, I said. And he did. Chapter 7. The records were in the East Library, one of the wings that had survived, because the madness, it turned out, avoided the places Cale loved. It took us 3 days to go there together. Not because the distance was great. Because trust, real trust, moves slower than that. We went before midnight, while the silver was still quiet in his eyes. He moved through the corridors like a ghost of the man he had been, familiar with every turn, every door, every window that let in a slant of specific morning light. I watched him in those moments. When he thought I wasn't watching. He would touch things as he passed them. The spine of a book. The carved edge of a doorframe. Small, brief touches, like confirmation. Like reassurance. Like checking that the world was still real. My chest hurt, watching it. The library was magnificent even in its dusty neglect. Shelves rising to the ceiling, a rolling ladder on a brass rail, stacks of maps and records that had not been opened in years. The smell of old paper and cold air and something beneath it, something green and faint, like the memory of a garden. He led me to the section he remembered. A cabinet in the far corner. Locked. He had the key on a chain around his neck. I noticed he never took it off, even through the worst nights. Inside were 3 leather-bound journals. Old. Older than the current palace records by at least a generation. These belonged to my grandfather's court healer, Cale said. She was a scholar of curses. She documented everything she ever encountered or theorized. He opened the 3rd journal, near the back. His hands were careful with it. I found this passage 8 months before you arrived. I leaned in. The handwriting was dense and slanting but readable. A compulsion curse of this complexity is not achieved in one act, it read. It requires an anchor. Something introduced to the body before the curse is spoken. Something the curse attaches to. A poison. Tasteless. Slow. And once the poison takes root, the spoken curse requires only a word, a drop of blood, a breath, to activate. The subject will not know. They will feel only the madness, and believe it is their own. I read it twice. A poison, I said. He was poisoned first. And then the curse was spoken over him. Yes, Cale said. Which means? It means someone had access to you before the journey. Before the north. I looked up. Someone who could put something in your food. Your drink. Your rooms. Without raising suspicion. Someone who had been close to me for years. Castle. Or someone Castle paid. I turned another page. And then I stopped. Because at the bottom of the next entry, in a different hand, newer ink, newer pressure, someone had added a single line. A note. The anchor can be identified. It will leave traces in the blood that respond to moonlight. Look for the pattern under a silver lamp. Look for the mark behind the left ear. I looked at Cale. He was already looking at me. Has anyone ever checked? I asked. No one has ever gotten close enough, he said. We looked at each other. And then, slowly, he turned and moved his hair away from the left side of his neck. I moved closer. Under the silver lamp mounted to the wall of the library. There it was. A mark. Faint as a watermark. Barely visible to the naked eye. But there. A small spiral, like a coiled serpent, just behind his left ear. The anchor. The proof. It's there, I whispered. He closed his eyes. Then we know, he said. We know, I agreed. But knowing and proving are 2 different things. And whoever had put that mark there was still inside this palace. Still watching. Still managing. Still waiting for Cale to finally destroy himself. And now that we were looking. They would know we were looking. Which made everything infinitely more dangerous. Chapter 8. The trap had to be subtle. Cale explained it to me over 3 nights, during the hours after the madness broke and before the dawn made everything real. We were careful. We spoke in low voices. We didn't write anything down. Because someone in this palace had been reading everything for 3 years. Lord Castle was not alone in this. That much became clear. One of the senior house servants had been on Castle's payroll since before the journey north. Mara confirmed it, pale and frightened, when I pressed her carefully in the kitchen garden one morning. Doran, she said. The name barely audible. He was placed here 12 years ago. He reports to Castle's man in the outer city. Does he know I've been in the library? Mara looked at me. Her answer was in the look. So the clock was moving. We had, at best, days before Castle understood that the king was no longer deteriorating, that something had interrupted the plan's progress. We needed to move first. Kale sent a sealed message to 3 people outside the palace, old commanders from before the curse, men who had served his father and grandfather, men who owed nothing to Castle. The seals were personal and could not be replicated. The message was simple: come quietly, come armed, come now. And then we waited. 5 days. 5 days during which I continued to sit with Kale through his midnights, continued to talk him through the worst of it, continued to learn the landscape of his madness, the peaks and valleys of it, the specific sounds he made when the silver was strongest, the way his breathing changed when it was starting to ebb. And something was happening that we hadn't predicted. The madness was getting shorter. Not dramatically. Not enough to announce. But I could feel it, in the way the silver faded a full half-hour earlier than it had the week before. In the way he was beginning to surface from it faster. The bond was working. Slowly. Painstakingly. But working. On the 4th night, with the madness still burning in his eyes but something underneath it that was reaching toward me, he said my name. Not a warning. Not a snarl. Just my name. Lyra. Like a hand held out in the dark. I reached back. I'm here, I said. I'm not going anywhere. His silver eyes found mine. And for one long moment, both things existed at once, the curse and the man, and neither one consumed the other. Just coexistence. Just barely. But it was enough. On the 5th day, the commanders arrived. 3 of them. Quiet, experienced, scarred. They came through the old servants' tunnels that Kale remembered from childhood, tunnels that Castle didn't know about because Castle had only been appointed to the council after Kale took the throne. That small fact, that one detail, was the thing that had kept us alive this long. That night, while Castle dined in the East Hall with his associates, while Doran the spy carried his usual report, while the palace moved through its ordinary midnight rhythms, the commanders sealed the exits. And Kale walked into the council chamber. Not in chains. Not mad. Not alone. Chapter 9. Castle was exactly what I had imagined. Tall. Lean. Composed in the way that men are composed when they have spent years arranging things to their advantage. His hair was silver at the temples. His hands were elegant. He wore his rings like armor. He was standing at the long council table reviewing documents when Kale walked in. He looked up. And for exactly 1 second, one fractional, unguarded second, his face showed what he really felt. Terror. Then it smoothed over. Like oil on water. My king, he said. His voice did not waver. You seem, well. Sit down, Castle, Kale said. I was not aware you were. I said sit down. A pause. He Saturday. I stood to the side, in the shadow near the door. Kale had wanted me there, not hidden. Present. He said it mattered that there was a witness who had no stake in Castle's version of events. We found the anchor, Kale said. Castle said nothing. We found the journal entry that describes how the curse was constructed. We know about the poison, the one administered before the journey north. We know about Doran. We know about the contact in the outer city. Kale's voice was very quiet. And we know about my sister. The name of the sister landed in the room like a spark landing in dry grass. Castle's composure cracked. Just slightly. Just around the eyes. Your sister made her own choices. Where is she? Kale said. Still quiet. That was somehow worse than shouting. Where is Sarah? I don't know what you're. Lord Castle. One of the commanders stepped forward from behind the door. Then another. Then the third. Castle looked at the room. At the exits that were no longer exits. And he made a decision. He chose to talk. Not because he was noble. Not because he was guilty. Because men like Castle, when they have no moves left, do what they have always done, they negotiate. The Northern Alphas offered me more than you could understand, he said. Power. Land. A seat at the highest table. All I had to do was weaken you. Slowly. Quietly. Remove the obstacle. He looked at Cale with something almost like genuine regret, the kind that is really just regret for getting caught. You were always going to be too strong to remove any other way. And my sister? Cale asked. A pause. She is alive, Castle said. Hidden. In the borderlands. I can give you the location. The room was very still. Cale stood for a moment that seemed to last a long time. Then he turned and looked at me. Just briefly. Just a glance. But in it I saw everything, the relief and the rage and the grief and the strange, tentative, terrifying thing that had been building between us through all those midnight hours. He looked back at Castle. You will give me the location, he said. And every name. Every contact. Every arrangement you made. And in exchange. You are not negotiating, Cale said. You are answering. Castle answered. All of it. All night. Every name, every location, every step of the plan that had been executed over 3 careful years. And buried in the middle of it, almost like an afterthought, almost like he didn't think I was paying attention. He mentioned my father. Chapter 10. He said it so casually. The Ashvale envoy was useful early on. He helped arrange the initial access. Before your father's time, before the first ambassador rotation, Aldrich Voss was the contact who ensured the poison reached the kitchen without questions. He understood the importance of. Stop, I said. Both Cale and Castle looked at me. I had stepped forward without realizing it. Out of the shadow and into the light. My voice was controlled. Barely. Say that again, I said. Castle looked at me. Reassessing. Calculating. Your father, he said, with the casual cruelty of a man who has already lost everything and so no longer sees the point of mercy, was one of the original architects of this. He arranged access to the palace kitchens 17 years ago, long before any of this was executed. He was paid in land grants and political protection. He was not a small player, girl. He was foundational. The room felt very far away. 17 years ago. I was 1 year old 17 years ago. My father had made this arrangement, this entire chain of events, this poison, this curse, this 3 years of Cale's suffering, before I could even walk. And then, when the debts and the consequences had spiraled beyond his control, when the plan had gone wrong and chaos had replaced the promised power, he had offered me, not as an act of desperation, as an act of containment, to keep me from ever learning the truth. I understood everything now. The way he hadn't looked at me. The way he had whispered, "You will save us all," like it was absolution. He hadn't been trying to save the village. He had been trying to silence his only witness. I stood very still. Cale was at my side. I didn't know when he had moved there, but I could feel the warmth of him, solid and present at my shoulder. Lyra, he said quietly. Just my name. I exhaled. Finish getting everything, I said. And I walked back to the shadow by the door. Because I needed a moment. And I needed no one to see me take it. By morning, Castle was secured. By noon, riders were already moving toward the borderlands to find Sarah. And I was sitting alone in the library, surrounded by the old healer's journals and the smell of cold paper and things that had been hidden for years, understanding that the truth had 2 edges. And both of them cut. Chapter 11. Breaking the curse was not a single dramatic moment. I want to be honest about that. Stories make it clean. 1 act. 1 sacrifice. 1 pure, burning declaration of love, and the darkness shatters and the sun comes out. Real things are harder. Real things take time. The healer's journal described what was needed. Not magic in the formal sense, not potions or rituals or the blood of a rare animal. The anchor had to be dissolved. And the anchor, that small spiral mark behind Cale's ear, had been designed to resist dissolution. It fed on isolation. On absence of bond. On the specific loneliness of a person who has been separated from the thing that was made for them. Which meant the cure was the bond. Not performed. Not declared. Built. Night after night, inch by inch, through every midnight I sat with him and spoke through the silver and refused to leave. Through every morning when he looked at me with grey exhausted eyes and I looked back without flinching. Through every careful conversation in the library, every moment in the corridors where he touched the doorframes like checking that the world was still real, every small act of staying. The bond had been building the whole time. And on a night 3 weeks after Castle's confession, something shifted. Midnight came. The air thickened. The pressure built. And Cale walked through the hidden door. And his eyes were not silver. They were grey. Just grey. Still stormy. Still vast. Still carrying 3 years of wreckage. But grey. He stood in the center of the room and looked at me. And I looked at him. The silence was different. Not the silence of containment. Not the silence of a man fighting himself. Just silence. Just 2 people in a room. It's quiet, he said. Like he was testing the word. Yes, I said. He crossed the room. Slowly. Like he was learning how to trust his own body again. He stood in front of me. Close enough that I could smell the pine dark scent of him, the cold stone and something underneath it. Something warm and specific and only his. He raised his hand. He touched my face. And it didn't hurt him. No silver surge. No lurch back. No chains. Just his hand. Just my face. Just the 2 of us standing in the room where everything had begun. Thank you, he said. Not romantically. Not dramatically. Just honestly. Like those 2 words were the most complete thing he had ever said. Don't thank me yet, I said. We still have a throne to take back. Something moved in his grey eyes. Not the silver. Something warmer. Something that looked a great deal like the beginning of a smile. Chapter 12. Taking the throne back was not a battle. It was an accounting. Castle's network was extensive, but it was also brittle. It had been built on fear and secrecy, and once the light was on it, once names were spoken aloud in rooms full of people, the whole structure began to collapse in on itself. Castle's allies in the outer cities fled or surrendered within a week. The Northern Alphas, when confronted with the documented evidence of their arrangement, chose diplomacy over war, because war against a king who was no longer mad, no longer isolated, no longer chained, was a war they could not calculate winning. Sarah was found in the borderlands. She was thin. Frightened. She had been kept comfortable enough to be used as leverage, but leverage changes a person. She stood in the doorway of the palace she had grown up in and looked at her brother for a long time before she crossed the room. They held each other in silence. I gave them that. I stepped outside. The palace grounds in daylight were different from what I had imagined. Overgrown in places. Cracked flagstones. But the bones of something beautiful still underneath it all. The bones of something that could be repaired. Cale found me there an hour later. He stood beside me, looking at the grounds. It's a lot of work, I said. Yes, he agreed. Where do you start? He was quiet for a moment. Then, the gates, I think. Make them something people want to approach instead of fear. I looked at him. He looked at me. Stay, he said. Simple. Not a command. Not a plea. Just a question asked plainly by a person with nothing left to hide. I know this is not what you were brought here for. I know what was done to you, what your father did, what I am, what this place has been. I know that staying is not a small thing. No, I said. It isn't. But I'm asking. Because you, he stopped. Started again. You are the reason I have something worth ruling. You are the reason any of this is worth rebuilding. He met my eyes. Stay. Not as a sacrifice. Not as a prize. As whatever you choose to be. I thought about the kitchen table in Ashvale. My mother's dress. The rope around my wrists. The cart moving north in the dark. And then I thought about the library. The midnight hours. The silver fading. The mark behind his ear. The truth that had cost me everything I thought I had, and given me everything I had never known to want. I choose Queen, I said. He breathed. Like it was the first real breath he had taken in years. Then Queen it is, he said. The coronation was held on the night of the next full moon. Not at midnight. At dawn. When the sky was just turning, that specific color between night and day that belongs to neither one and is more beautiful for it. I wore red. Not white. Never white again. 4 months later, at exactly midnight, someone came to the palace gates. The guards on duty told me about it the next morning. They had heard him before they saw him, a sound they described, hesitantly, as somewhere between screaming and howling. Like a man caught between 2 versions of himself. Getting closer. He crawled the last 100 meters on his hands and knees. By the time they reached him, he was a ruin. My father. Aldrich Voss. Former envoy. Former respectable man. Former person my mother had loved enough to give her life building a home with. He was barely recognizable. The curse had found him the night Kales broke, because a curse of that construction, when severed from its intended host, does not dissolve. It returns. To the ones who gave it life. To the architects. To the hands that first carried the poison through the door. Every midnight, the guard said, he had been reliving it. Every night for 4 months, the moment of his choice. The decision to sell his daughter. The calculation that had made him something smaller. Over and over. Until it had eaten him down to almost nothing. He was brought to a room, not the king's chamber. A quiet room. And I went to see him. He looked up when I walked in. His eyes were the same eyes. That was the worst part. Still the same eyes that had once been kind. Lyra, he said. Just my name. Like even the curse had stripped away everything else. I sat across from him. I thought about what I wanted to say. I had been thinking about it, honestly, since the night in the council chamber when Castle had said his name so casually. I had been thinking about it through everything. Do you understand what you did? I asked. He wept. Yes, he said. I understand. Then say it, I said. Not for me. For you. Say what you did. He said it. All of it. Slowly and in full and without excuses. He said it the way a wound is opened and cleaned, ugly and necessary, and at the end of it, something small and clean at the very bottom. I listened. All the way to the end. Then I said, I forgive you. He looked at me. Like he hadn't expected that. Like he had expected punishment, and forgiveness was a language he had lost the ability to understand. Not because you deserve it, I said. Not because what you did was small or forgivable in any ordinary sense. But because I have decided, very deliberately, not to carry the weight of who you chose to be. His face crumpled. Lyra. I forgive you, I said again. And I am not saving you. I stood. The curse that lives in you now, you built it. You carried the poison through the door. You made the choice, over and over, for 17 years. I looked at him. I cannot lift what was put there by your own hands. Only you can do that. And whether you do or whether you don't, I am going to live my life regardless. I walked to the door. You have a room here, I said. Food and warmth and healers who will do what they can. Not because you earned it. Because I choose mercy, and I will not let your choices dictate the size of mine. I turned. Goodbye, Papa. He called after me. I kept walking. Not because I didn't love him. But because love, real love, does not mean absorbing someone else's darkness until it becomes yours. I had learned that. In chains, in a room full of claw marks, across from a man who was fighting the worst version of himself every single night. I had learned that you can choose to stay, and you can choose to help, and you can choose to break the things that were meant to destroy you, but you cannot carry what another person built. You can only put it down. Outside the room, Kale was waiting. He fell into step beside me without a word. We walked down the corridor and out into the garden, the one we had started repairing, with the new flagstones laid last week and the first winter flowers just starting to come through the cold ground. How are you? He asked. Lighter, I said. And I meant it. He reached out. His hand found mine. We walked. And the palace was quiet. And the gates, rebuilt now, open. Something people could approach without fear. The way things should have been, all along. Because some monsters are born into the dark. But others build it. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. And no crown, no power, no blood spilled can undo what a person has made of themselves. But here is what they never tell you in the stories about sacrifice and curses and mad kings. The person who survives the dark, the one who walks into the room and stays, is not the one who was waiting to be saved. She was the one who decided to save herself. And everything else? Everything else followed. What part of this story stayed with you the most? Was it the midnight Kale fell to his knees? The morning Lyra chose not to run? Or the night she walked away from the one person she could not save? Tell me in the comments below. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that staying is sometimes the bravest thing you can do.